What's up, guys? Here with James. We're here at the Kenton studio, just hanging out, and we're going to talk about some custom turrets today. How you doing?
Doing good.
Cool. Good. Yeah, the heat's picking up here in Tennessee already, and these cicadas are getting out of control too.
Keep landing on me. I had one land right on my jug yesterday. I almost chopped myself. It was bad.
I know. I'm glad they don't I guess they don't sting or bite at all, right?
No, just stick to you and get really loud in your ears.
Yeah, growing up in California, I'm not used to this, all these bugs and the heat, but you grew up in Florida, so.
Yeah, I mean, I remember my first cicada batch and, trying to put little tooth floss leashes on them, things like that. Yeah, they were fun to mess with, but bugs, snakes, I'm pretty well versed.
Cool, yeah. Well, today we're going to be talking custom turrets again. Last podcast you saw was my dad and I kind of giving a history, a background of the company. So today, thought we'd throw in James and just kind of talk custom turrets. We have a rough draft here, so we don't get too down some rabbit holes. But yeah, what's some first impressions? What do we want to talk about?
For me, I mean, starting off, back when I was getting into precision shooting, I was actually looking for, I want to be able to print out my own dope chart and put it inside the eye cup of my scope. Mm-hmm. And actually trying to find formats. I found you guys before, I hadn't even talked to you guys, anything like that. And almost ordered one. And then I think I ended up just doing a little notebook, and it was a mess, but I didn't really even know custom turrets were a thing yet.
Yeah.
And so, meeting Mark and doing all this kind of stuff, it's been awesome to just see how you can run a ballistic calculator once and have it all in one place. And now I, have people that can just understand once they see it.
Yeah.
And that they're like, oh, this is how the math works. This is everything. And just really trying to make it a one-stop shop for everything you could need.
Yeah, just kind of putting it all together in yardage makes things a lot faster and easier to shoot too. But, yeah. Well, let's talk about what's needed to order a custom turret. So when you come to our website, you can either order online or over the phone, as a lot of you guys know. You actually start talking to James now, one of the salesmen. Yep. So let's talk about what's needed. So big variables. What are we talking about? Caliber, right?
Caliber.
Bullet. What's important for the bullet?
Bullet, your ballistic coefficient. Yeah. If you're running something like a soft point, your bullet's not going to be as nice through the air. Mm-hmm. If you're running something like a hollow point boat tail, you're definitely going to be able to fly a lot flatter and keep that high BC or ballistic coefficient. So having that kind of data on hand for sure.
So a lot of guys don't. I shouldn't say a lot of guys, but some guys don't know what BC is. It's essentially how aerodynamic the bullet is, how it's moving through the air.
Yeah. Ballistic coefficient, from the research I've done on it, was, figured out. G1, I think, was World War I naval ships, how those artillery rounds worked. And then G7, I think, was somewhere between 40s and 60s, if not later.
That's a whole podcast we'll have to do sometime just on ballistic coefficient, because all different readings. But for sure. Okay, and then muzzle velocity. So obviously more accurate if you chronograph, right?
Yep. Definitely chronograph, or, there's some factors that, let's say you don't know your exact altitude, your exact temperature.
Yeah.
We've seen guys, you take their data elsewhere, but if you have hey, I shot a target and I know the exact amount of clicks that I dialed to hit bullseye, we'll take it. That's just going to go in right at the field data section, and you could put that in an MOA, MRED, or just straight clicks.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I mean, even a rifle out of the box is going to shoot different for everyone, right? So that's why we always recommend chronographing. It's just the best. Mm-hmm. Getting that accurate speed for the most accuracy out of your custom yardage turret. 1-2 clicks going to make the difference, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Farther out you shoot, too. So, okay, so muzzle velocity, what are we missing next? We got zero distance, which comes down to preference, right?
Yep. I know a lot of guys are like, well, I know I'm going to do a 200-yard zero and then hold an inch or two low at 100.
Yeah.
That works. Or, we've got the rimfire guys that want a 50-yard zero. If your bullet's below 1,800 feet per second, we can do a 50-yard zero and have you going in one direction. That works
kind of
too.
like a double zero, too, yeah. So benefits of using a farther zero distance is going to get you farther on the custom yardage turret, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not going to have to eat up that 1, 2, or even 300 yards if you're starting a 300 yard zero. Most guys do a 1 or 200. And again, I mean, it really comes down to preference. And a lot of guys too, especially out in the East, only have access to like 100 yards, whether it's in their yard or at the range. So that's why the 100 yard zeros are a lot more common out here too, I'd say.
Absolutely.
Out East and like out West. But yeah, it comes down to preference. Next is going to be scope height measurement. That's pretty important, right?
Yep.
Explain how that works.
So the way you're kind of looking at that is if you have your barrel pointed in one line and your scope's over top of it looking in a straight line, your barrel's tilted up and your scope's kind of looking through that trajectory.
Yeah.
And your zero distance is making them meet together. So when you have your scope height, depending on how high it is, you're changing where those two intersect. So that's why we really want to try to get the most accurate measurement, because that's going to change at distance. And if you say it's 1.5 inches, but you have a 3-inch height, you know, we really start to see a difference, especially towards the middle of your trajectory as it's still climbing and before it starts falling. But I mean, the reality is overall, it makes a difference, especially when you're talking about, I want to be as accurate as possible.
Yeah. And the way we calculate scope height here, and most ballistic programs do this, is from center of scope to center of barrel. So we're talking reticle to firing pin.
Yeah.
So a lot of guys, you know, measure it, kind of take their bolt out, kind of eyeball it, center of that chamber, straight up to the center of the scope, where a lot of like scope manufacturers are going to have that logo, you know, their brand logo right there in the middle. So that's a cool reference point. Like tell guys, you know, from there to the firing pin. But okay. And then what else do we need? So we're talking about variables like elevation, temperature. Very important.
On the scope height,
yeah. You know, what you got?
I found for me, I'll actually take my bolt in the rifle, make sure it's clear, and I'll bring the bolt about halfway back in the chamber, right underneath the windage knob. Because normally your windage knob is going to be dead center of that scope tube. And I found with the calipers, you can bring it right down to the firing pin and make sure it's center on the windage knob, and that's how I get my measurements.
Yeah, definitely want to get it kind of 1/10 of an inch measurement for that. So cool. And then let's talk elevation, temperature. Both are important variables needed for the yardage turret. What's kind of the playroom between those two?
So on the altitude, you're looking at about 2,000 feet in either direction. So let's say if you selected 5, you're good up to 7,000 feet and down to 3,000 feet.
Yep.
So temperature, we try to stay within 20 degrees either direction, same sort of way. We found it won't affect your ballistics enough where you would miss a shot, especially a vital organ shot, something like that.
Yeah.
You're definitely going to be well within what you need to be.
Yeah. And then higher the elevation, less adjustment is needed, right? So if you're setting, for an example, if you're setting a turret for, let's say, 4,000 feet and you happen to be shooting way up at, 9,000 feet where there's less adjustment, it means you're going to be hitting high, right? An example of that, what are we thinking off the top of our head? Like a 6.5 Creedmoor, again, 4,000 feet, happen to be shooting 9 at like 500 yards. We're talking probably like 3 inches high?
Something like that.
Something like that, yeah. So, and obviously it gets exponentially bigger the farther out you shoot, but something to keep in mind. A lot of guys, we'll talk about reasons guys don't like to get turret and how we can combat that. But one of those reasons is the change in variables like elevation, temp, and we got ways around it. Obviously, another turret, and we have a yards to yards conversion calculator. But we'll talk about that. Same thing with temperature.
Yeah, same thing with temperature. I have a lot of guys say, well, how far off would I be? Could I really make it work? And oftentimes, I'll run it and I'll say, look, if you're going, let's say from 3,000 feet to 10,000 feet, it's just less air density. I'd say, maybe just be shy a click or two and they'll still be pretty close. But again, precision is our goal, is we want you to be as accurate as possible. And so when it comes down to putting in that data, we can tell you, or the calculator is a great way of, hey, I built my turret for this. Either I don't want to buy another turret, I don't want to buy another strip. The calculator is great because it'll give you the exact difference of where you are yard to yard for where your current data is with your holds of all your 50-yard or 10, 25-yard increments. Yeah.
And unless given to us by the customer, we use a standard barometric pressure and humidity. So those are standard. And those really come into play, honestly, when you're shooting really far.
Yeah.
So if you're rocking, again, like a 6.5 PRC or Creedmoor out to like 1,000 yards, they're pretty irrelevant. Unless you're trying to, hit a quarter out there 1,000 yards. But that's what we do with those two variables. So we do custom labels for our turrets, right? And that's something that's needed for the order.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to do it.
You don't have to, yeah.
We'll either put in your load data normally of just so you have a reference point, because we have guys calling back from years later saying, what bullet was I using again?
Exactly. Forget.
Yeah. And, totally understandable. So we either try to give you some notification, or we have guys that say, I want to put a personal message or something I want.
We've seen a lot of funny stuff.
Oh, yeah. A lot of funny stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, but yeah, that's definitely something that, we have guys that say they want theirs put in a certain way, or maybe they don't want all the data, just some real standard stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe just a caliber. It could be, I love you, Dad. It could be anything.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We have, here's an example here, right? An old Nikon, I think this is a Monarch 7, so high Monarch 7. And we have, again, that label's right on top with our logo. So, like you said, we have loyal customers that bought literally dozens of turrets, so that custom label really comes into play when you're kind of swapping out. Yeah. Especially when you're getting multiple turrets for that change in elevation and temperature, because it's like, you're shooting at home sea level, but I'm going out west hunt, 6,000 feet, grab that new turret, swap it on. Most scopes are pretty easy to swap out the turret, and then you're good to go. Know which is which. So cool. What else are we missing? Anything else?
I think for the data, that's about all you're going to need for... Oh, we will need to know if your scope is using quarter MOA, third MOA, mils, whatever you got. Most of those you're either going to be able to find in your instruction manual, on the box, or on the top of the turret. Most of them try to be labeled. We have seen people say, well, mine says 0.25 MOA instead of 1/4 MOA. Yeah. There's a lot of synonyms out there. It's just a matter of
decimal fraction.
Europeans, man, they love to make it just different enough where you got to write something else.
Yeah, there's some brands that do that, right? So that's obviously the first and most important variable, right? When you go to place the order, we need to know your scope. We need to know what your click value is, and then clicks per turn. Typically, we have access to all that information or know from past orders. But cool. And then as far as just to let you guys know, we do everything in house, right? So if you don't already know this, we're taking your ballistics, we're running the ballistic on our proprietary program. If you're giving us field data, that's totally fine. We get a lot of guys that do that. It's actually going to be more accurate at the end of the day because, again, every rifle shoots differently. And then we're literally running the artwork, and then we're lasering the knobs from scratch, and then we're shipping off to you guys. There are a couple models out there. You have to send us a scope. But most models you don't need to. We just send off the turrets, right?
There's very few at this point because we do like a couple of the very specific Zeiss. We do the retrofit.
Yeah, some of the old Conquests. Yeah. So popular still. There's so many out there.
Still getting those. We have a few models that we can actually add a zero stop, which is a lot of feature. The guys are like, oh, I didn't get that from the factory. And we've found a way to be able to fit that in. Yeah. But the retrofits are a cool way that we can actually, and this isn't all models, but some models we can take it from maybe like a dust cap small turret with just the smallest lines you could possibly imagine to a full size target turret exposed with, just set screw. And very often then you can order a generic if you're like, I just want the turret, or we can do yardage. And once you have a retrofit, you can order more.
Yeah. Going back to your zero stop comment, you're totally right. A lot of most guys in the industry today expect their scope to have a zero stop. And we're talking scopes from $300 all the way up to $3,000. So it's really an industry standard now. Yeah. But a lot of these older scopes didn't have that zero stop. So a company that we're really known for adding zero stop to is the Leopold, the old Leopolds, like the old VX and VariXs. So we have definitely aftermarket turrets as well as the added zero stop, which, just like the Conquest, just as popular today as they were 10 years ago before I would start working here, so there's a lot of them still floating out there.
Yeah, I think so much of it changed when it went from because those originally were the dust cap where you had the coins, and I can't tell you, people using the tail end of their brass, whatever, to adjust that turret, and it used to be, then I'm going to put my dust cap cover, and that's going to sit there for the next 15 years and never get touched.
Yeah.
And that's how people did it. Now we've moved towards a lot of like long range distance shooting or precision, NRL, PRS style shooting, and guys are dialing if they have the time.
Yeah.
Or guys hunting, we have guys with the BDC reticles and they're like, well, my BDC reticle doesn't match with my bullet. It's like, well, that might not have been made for your bullet, and they make you use, an online app, and you got to figure out your yards, which is, still a neat product, and it can help a lot of guys. But if you're like, man, I just want to be able to turn, not remember numbers, and have it just labeled custom turret, I definitely think is the way to go.
Get the yardage turret. Yeah, and even, at the end of the day, there is a lot of these shooters out there that are obviously know MOA or MRAD very well and have practically it memorized or written down at least on dope charts. Again, we can take that information and simply translate it to a yardage turret, right? So that work, the hard work that you've done in order to get that dope, we're just simply going to take it, run the artwork, laser it, and send it off. So you're translating that into a yardage turret, which again is going to be way faster than even getting the dope and dialing to that MOA. It's just kind of harder to, or easier to read yardage than it is to read MOA.
Absolutely. And for the guys who, I know so many guys run the dope charts on their stocks or things like that. We do engrave.
Yeah.
Where is it? Right there. We can do MOA, we can do windage, we can do, custom data, whatever you'd like. Yeah. And we can still fit that if you're like, I don't want the turret, I want a chart. The chart I think is a great tool because I've seen guys run that on the side of their scope if they're like, hey, I really just want to keep my MOA. I'm always changing loads. That's if you're like, I mainly run this, but maybe I run a varmint load for hog or, but this is my main target load, stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, we've done some other projects like drop charts for reticles. Obviously, the ballistic charts, like you said, you'll get guys that have their main turret, but they're changing to a slightly different load, so they want their chart for that one. Aside from getting another turret or something like that. So, cool. What else we want to talk about? So we talked a little bit about benefits, obviously, of the yardage turret. What's some kind of like pushback? And we know, but what's kind of like some pushback we've heard as a leader in the industry, right? We're a leader in custom yardage turrets, take a lot of pride in that, continue to grow. Since 2002, we're here, we're not going anywhere. What's kind of those pushbacks we hear when it comes to a custom yardage turret? What are you thinking?
I've definitely heard a lot of people say, well, what if it's, I want to change loads, or if it's, I'm going to need essentially more than one turret, and they want to try to squeeze it all into one turret. Yeah. And it's one of those, the point is that it's a clean, easy to use system. And so when you try to cram multiple loads onto one turret, it can get messy, it gets hard to read. Especially if you have one like a turret that uses either like a set screw or maybe a main column shaft screw, something like that. Something like that you can pop them off. Start with your main one. See if you like it, and if you love it, then to me, once I started using them, I really think I would much rather do that than have to use, a dope book, something like that, to carry around or memorize all of my different things.
And we encourage that. I mean, we encourage our customers, find the one load that works great with your rifle, the one load that you love, the one load that's giving you consistency and velocity.
Absolutely.
So we encourage that, right? I mean, we'll get guys that call, they're getting a brand new setup, with a brand new scope, and obviously want the turret, and we're saying, all right, get it set up, get the scope from us even, we'll get you credit for that free turret. But figure out what really shoots well, and then we'll get you that turret. Good point. Another pushback off the top of my head is like change in elevation temperature. We kind of talked about that earlier. What are we thinking there?
Very often I've found most guys, if they split the difference, like let's say they're like, well, I do, a lot of shooting at 2,000 feet and a lot at 6,000.
Yeah.
Do 4,000. Like I said, you're going to be good in either direction in temperature. Try to split the difference. And as long as you're not going from sea level to 14,000 feet, like I said, we really can guarantee within that 2,000 feet in either direction. But splitting the difference, if you're off by a little bit, it's not going to kill you. You're still going to be able to do well shooting, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you have a bigger hit zone when it comes to hunting too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Obviously you want to be accurate, but you have that something to keep in mind when you have that variance of that 2,000 feet. And most guys aren't going back and forth from sea level to 9,000 with, back and forth like that shooting.
Very often, I think from the guys I've talked to, it's a hunting cabin. It's a trip, and totally get it.
Lifetime trip. Yeah.
Or an annual, like, this is where me and my high school buddies or college buddies, whoever go. I had a guy today actually call me, and he's like, I still shoot with the guy that I played baseball with on my little league team, and he was in his 70s. So, I mean, it's, those kind of get-togethers that they're meeting somewhere, and that's where they're like, hey, I go here enough that it might be worth an extra turret.
Yeah. And again, we talked about earlier, there are other options, right? Mm-hmm. So if it's not in your budget to spend, to buy another turret, really we have 3 options for these guys, right? And this comes down to, again, change in bullet, change in temperature, change in elevation. Mm-hmm. Our options are 1, buy another turret. We're here with you guys. We're flexible. We'll get you a discount even. Say, hey, I need a different turret for change in elevation. So that's option number 1. Option 2 is going to be our second most popular product, our ballistic strip. Yep. We actually just did a video together on that recently, but it's an acrylic laser engraved like sticker, right? Military grade. So instead of getting an aluminum knob, you're going to get that decal. Mm-hmm. So this is great for guys that get their main turret for home and then are going out, whatever, out west or wherever to a hunt. Then they can use that sticker on their factory knob. Going to be half the price of a turret and you're good to go. It's going to work just as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I get guys that they'll order their primary ballistic one and they'll order the sticker and they say, all right, I'm going to do this one hunt. And the cool thing about if you order any of the strips is you get a duplicate. So you will, if you take it off and you're like, well, I really want to do that again, you got another go if you took it off. And the semi-permanent is incredible. I have been running one for months now, have seen no wear and tear, and frankly, when I show up to the range, I forget that it's a strip. It looks like a custom turret.
Yeah, we were really careful when we added those strips. I think it's been like 3-4 years ago, but we were really careful, did a ton of testing to make sure we got the appropriate material where there's no flaws and long, durability, long lasting, all that good stuff. So cool. So that's option number 2. And then option 3 is, not a lot of guys know about it, but we do have nothing like it in the industry. We have a yards to yards conversion calculator. Mm-hmm. So most of your ballistic calculators out there, we all know, right, converts your MOA to yardage, right? Mm-hmm. Tells you that what dope you need, 25, 50, whatever yard increments. With our yards to yards conversion calculator, it'll tell you what you need to dial to with that changing variable. Right. So let's go back to our 6.5 Creedmoor example. I'm shooting a 6.5 Creedmoor set at 4,000 feet, right? Mm-hmm. I'm shooting way up at 9,000 feet. You run that in our ballistic calculator, and it'll let you know, again, in 20 or 50 or 100 yard increments where you need to dial to with that change in elevation. Right. So example, I'm shooting 500 yards with 9,000 feet. It's going to tell me dial to 425, right? And that's a great option for guys that love running ballistics, kind of working on a budget or they need like a really quick fix, right? For guys that are way up that kind of didn't take this into account when they went to their hunt. But that's something we designed a few years ago too that's picking up steam. And again, there's nothing like in the market, so we're happy we offer that. Yeah. So
that's a really cool option. And, I know a lot of guys, I hear them say, well, if I'm on a hunt, I really don't want to have my phone or be relying on my phone because if it's dead, totally get it. Print it out. Yep. Try to have a hard copy. And I know, the whole point of the turret is to avoid those kind of dope sheets. Well, it's not the whole point, but it's a benefit of not having to carry something like that around. But if you're doing a once in a lifetime hunt, tape it on your stock, do it something like that. Yeah. Try to make it a little more permanent, and it'll be accurate, just as accurate as any of the calculations we would be doing for another turret.
Bother James, he'll make a chart for you with that conversion. Give you more work. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, those are 3 options. I would say it's probably our biggest pushback we get. Change in bullet. And what's really cool is, if you are changing your bullet, there's BCs and velocities that are close out there, right? Mm-hmm. So you can get away with using that turret, especially in that hunting situation with that, with the same turret, right? Because again, very little change with that speed in BC. So that's something to keep in mind. Mm-hmm. All right, cool. So that's our Yard Shards conversion ballistic app. Do you want to chime in on anything on the app?
I really think we covered pretty much everything about it. If you're really thinking about diving into multiple areas with that turret and trying to stick to one, it's definitely a useful tool to look into.
Cool. And then they can access it on our website or through our app, right?
Yeah. And we do have instructions for using the app and going into that, and you can save profiles with your load data, so it's not like you got to type it out every time or anything like that.
Cool. All right, well, that's pretty good for today. We have some exciting news. We're doing Arkin turrets officially. It should be available, I'd say, within the month or so. And we have turrets available for that new Viper HD line that just came out from Vortex. So excited about that. We should definitely get a ton of inquiries for those. We're starting to offer the turrets for the Primary Arms GLX models, which have that popular locking style turret. And we started doing the Leopold RDS BDC turrets.
Yeah.
Those have been crazy popular, right?
Really neat for muzzle loaders, especially, guys trying to do that in states where they have the rules and state laws about using no magnification and stuff like that.
Yeah,
It's nice to be able to use a ballistic turret on something low power, no power, I should say.
Yeah, Utah just passed that. I think it was the end of last year, or maybe it was the beginning of this year, but they just passed that. So that's where we've been doing a lot of those orders for Utah guys.
Yeah.
We have some dealers out there too that have been getting those set up. So, and then we have a new product coming out. So stick around, check out our website. Anything else?
Nothing I can think of. Thank you for having me on, and I hope to be on more.
Definitely will. All right. Thanks for hopping on, guys, and we'll see you guys later.